Welcome to Rev'd Up for Sunday, everyone. We are the clergy of St. Mark's Episcopal Church here in New Canaan, Connecticut. I'm Elizabeth Garnsey.
And I'm Peter Walsh.
I'm John Kennedy.
We've arrived at the fifth Sunday after the Epiphany, and we only have one to go after this. Can you believe it, before we get to Lent? So we're still in Mark 1. Last week we heard another excerpt, and this week we get another series of very significant snippets of Jesus' life, and I think within that there's a lot of powerful lessons about how Mark is written and how we can use it. So let's hear the text. This is Mark 1:29 to 39. After Jesus and his disciples left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, when it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also, for that is what I came out to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. The gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. So I'm going to jump in here, John. Sorry if you wanted to say something. I'm really excited about something. So we think or are told in our studies that Mark's gospel is a reflection of Peter and Peter's teaching, and that Mark wrote down Peter's stuff. And if that is true, this story today is perfect to as some sort of proof to that. I mean, look what we've got here. We are in Peter and Andrew's and James and Peter and Andrew's hometown. Now, granted, two podcasts ago we said they were from Bethsaida, but maybe born in Bethsaida, moved to Capernaum, or maybe not. But anyway, we're in Peter's hometown, and we've just been at the synagogue. We go 40 yards, or maybe 50 yards for those of you who've been to Capernaum. It's so close. And you go 50 yards, and where are you? You're in Peter's house. And then while you're in Peter's house, you get Peter's mother-in-law. So now, in a healing that would have been a very private, in a room with a very, very sick woman. And so we have that. We have his house. We have his mother-in-law. And then at sundown, it says they're gathered around the door, which is one of those things like he was in the back of the boat on a pillow, where you get this little factoid that would be very particular in its memory. And if you take a look at the footprint of Peter's house, there's these small rooms, because no room in antiquity can be big because they don't have wood to go over the top of them, and particularly because there's not much wood in the Holy Land, at least that part of the Holy Land. He's around the door. And then all of this stuff happens, and then the next morning, who's looking for him? But it's Peter. So this is a Peter story. It's a Jesus story about Peter's interactions through the eyes of Mark, told by Mark.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. You want to respond to that, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to dig into with the particularities around Peter and his mother-in-law. I mean, first of all, Peter's married, right? So that's interesting, and that's also mentioned by Paul in 1 Corinthians.
On topic.
Yeah, right? The first pope was married. And then his mother-in-law. I mean, there's so much to say about the mother-in-law. I don't know if we're ready to jump into those details.
Let's stay on the first pope here for one moment, unless you got to go.
I would respond to something you said.
Yeah.
I think that this is it very well is. I think I agree with you that it's stories told by Peter and possibly others, and I think Mark. We are also taught it's the first or earliest form of this. It's the earliest gospel and the first of its kind.
Right.
This genre of gospel. And clearly it's a collection of stories that were told by people who lived through them and saw them differently once they experienced the resurrection. And at least one source I read suggests that the whole thing is written by these people who experienced Jesus differently, had their memories, and went back and told the stories as if they were after the resurrection and Jesus teaching them what to do. And, at the end of Mark, in Mark 16, he says, go back to Galilee where I will show you everything.
Right.
So in a way, it becomes a handbook for Peter and all the other earliest followers to realize what to do now. And they go back to Galilee and they sort of walk through these healings and stuff. So there's like a double vision.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I never,
and I thought that was sort of interesting. Like, a lot of the elements here, taking her by the hand and lifting her up, after the resurrection, Jesus raised us all, so, and the minute she's raised, she becomes a deacon and begins to serve. She responds to her resurrection in service. And so it's a sort of teaching for the earliest followers to go and do likewise.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And because you brought it that way, we were going to, I'm going to stick right where you are. And this is an icon that I gave to Jill Sekulis, our director of operations, because I think she's like Peter's mother. She's the ultimate servant. This was going to be my secret Santa Christmas gift to her that was not to be revealed. But anyway, it came late and Jill got it late. But you'll see in the icon that the way that Jesus grabs Peter's mother-in-law's hand is the exact same way that in icons you see Jesus grabbing Adam and Eve, or those who have died and been in the hell canyons of hell, the dead. He doesn't grab them by the hand; he grabs them by the wrist, so that there can be no chance that he cannot pull them up.
Wow,
so
that's beautiful.
Just what you say.
Very
beautiful.
powerful.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So Elizabeth, you mentioned that Peter's mother-in-law becomes a deacon. And of course, that is the actual Greek verb for serve here, diakonine. And it is also the verb that is used to describe the ways that the angels minister to Jesus during his temptation. We don't get the detail about the angels, I don't think, in Mark's gospel, but in perhaps Matthew and or Luke. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't do all my homework on that, but I do know that that's the verb used to describe what the angels do for Jesus.
I think it is in Mark, where there's wild beasts and the angels wait on him.
Okay,
well,
there you go. Yeah, okay, so you just don't get the details about the different temptations. Also, it's used by Jesus when he describes himself as the Son of Man who came not to be served, but to serve.
Right.
So very contrary to this being a story about a poor woman who's sick in bed and then immediately has to get up and take care of the men. It's really about her being energized, full of energy to do what Jesus does. And the English, at least the NRSV translation, doesn't convey the severity of her illness, but the idea is that she is deathly sick.
Yeah. Yeah, she probably has malaria, which is what they think. That's what malaria was the super high fever thing. She's not in bed resting. She's bedridden. Yeah. She's very sick and potentially eventually to die. And this is where this exposes how our scriptures don't tell us so much of what we want to know. We have Peter's wife, who we get a little glance at, like, okay, so he's got a mother-in-law, and then in that incredible passage in 1 Corinthians where he says that he traveled with her, and you're like, huh? He did? How come we don't hear more about that? She has no name. Peter's mother-in-law has no name.
Yeah.
I would love these people to be named, so we have all these, St. Paul churches. We could get some more sanctified churches after. These are the people.
Definitely.
I like the vagueness of these details because I think we get to play with them much, much more. And the idea of a fever, we live our lives feverishly.
That's
and,
true.
It doesn't really matter what she had because she was in bed with it and unable to do anything else. And to be raised up out of that just applies to any sort of sickness. And also in the passage that you addressed last week that I missed talking about with you, Jesus is casting out demons in the synagogue, and those are people demonized. They have demons who are declared unclean and unholy, and here he's in an ordinary house curing an ordinary illness. He can do it all, and I think there's a new sacred place when Jesus leaves the temple. He enters the house in the resurrected Jesus sanctifies all these spaces, and it was the Sabbath, I think, when he does this. And so we don't necessarily need to know exactly what all the sicknesses were that he healed, because I think the idea is this in Mark that it's the span of all death and all, sacred demonization, holy, kind of religious outside casting out, and also just our ordinary walk of life that's so burdensome. That Jesus really
and you've
reaches
certainly given a beautiful defense of Mark in telling of the story, which is the scraping away of the details, so that you just get bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
The spareness of it is like getting hit constantly with the message, and you don't get lost in, she had malaria. But
it's an incredible way of writing. He was a genius.
Super hard way to write. I mean, this is like right out of, I didn't have enough time to write a short letter. Or Hemingway's writing, the spareness of the words, no big words. It's in that vein where there is very little description. I think that one of the things for me is that makes the gospel like poetry. It doesn't give it secrets right away. You really have to stay with it for a while. And I oftentimes need little pieces and parts to hold on to, for me to go, aha, now I can see it, now I can get it. Like when you get to the part where it says, that evening at sundown. So one of the classical Markan things is he doubly says, that evening at sundown. So he doubles up on this description rather than just saying that.
Right.
And then, and so what
meaning
that's...
it's past the Sabbath
It's
now.
past the Sabbath time.
Yeah.
So suddenly you're like, it's past the Sabbath. And on the Sabbath, you can't care for your problems on the Sabbath, and you can't walk that far. And then it says the whole town shows up. Now, I'm sort of interested in this because if you go to Capernaum today, and everybody should go to Capernaum who's there, because they have this like flying saucer church that the Franciscans built over the top of the ruins, and which was basically built in the same design as a Byzantine church that was trying to, keep the ruins of St. Peter's house as sacred. But we get this whole thing that the whole town shows up. So Capernaum now is a bunch of ruins. And I looked up in Wikipedia, I said, how many people lived in Capernaum when Jesus lived there? Of course, Wikipedia knowing all things, right? And they said 1,500, which sort of made me chuckle. But whatever it is, it's in the hundreds. Capernaum was not a nothing place. I mean, it was an active fishing town, and there was, a busy highway, traveled highway, the via... It's something about water, the road along the water where there was a lot of trade. And so...
Right.
Small, but not that small place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then all the more, that this is a good place for Jesus's messianic secret to sort of enter the story. He's in this place where there are people, they are gathering to see him, and his fame is spreading. And in this story, we get one instance, the first instance of what will show up again and again throughout Mark's gospel, to a much lesser extent in the other synoptic gospels, which is this prohibition against people who know who he is saying who he is. In this case, it's demons. He will not permit them to speak because they knew him. Later, it'll be ordinary people who kind of figure out, you're the Messiah or something. And he says, don't tell anybody. After the transfiguration, he says, do not tell anybody until I've been raised. And that's just one of the key themes of Mark, and it's such an interesting one, especially juxtaposed with John, where he's just like kind of out in the open with it.
Yeah, I'm the guy.
Yeah, I'm the guy. In Mark, he's like, don't tell anyone I'm the guy. I'm serious.
Right.
So what do you think that's
Yeah, I mean,
about?
okay, Elizabeth, what do you make of the Messianic secret?
I've started to believe
you pro or
that.
con? I mean, you pro
Pro or con, yeah. I don't know. I almost feel like it's sort of a trick of the Markan community reading this gospel, that they weren't allowed. They didn't even know. They couldn't have possibly said who he was. His own disciples. They didn't realize it at the time. But now that they get to read the story as if they were all being silenced, now they must go and tell. I mean, in a way, it's kind of a I don't know what the term would be.
You think it's a literary trick of sorts?
Not literary, but just a mental or a spiritual prodding that you couldn't then. Now you must. And now that's what we're doing, is going out to say who he is. And I don't know. That's just my own reflection, because I don't know what to make of that. I think we've talked about this before, that, Jesus knew they wouldn't possibly know what to do with that information and wouldn't be able to frame it correctly because he wasn't here for political reasons, and he didn't want to start a political revolution. So maybe something like that.
I mean, I used to be really down on it. I didn't like it, and then I got to be kind of pro for it. So I've been all over the place.
Really
I think that it's so.
Never thought to be for it again.
Yeah. Well, it used to irritate me. Then I was like, oh no, this is super good. And then I think that the interesting part about it, at least in this version of it, is this idea of the spiritual world and the spiritual life and what's going on in the spiritual world. Back to what we were talking about last week, is that we don't live in neutrality and we're trying to find God in a neutral zone. And that in antiquity the world was completely peopled by spirits, many of them malignant spirits, and that what's happening, that because these demons are in the spiritual world, they understand the spirituality of who Jesus is. But the rest of the dunderhead disciples are not living in the spiritual world. They're living in the plane that we all live on, and so they don't have that information. So the demons have more information because they're of the same world, and as beings of darkness, they recognize the being of light. And always, last week Jesus told them to shut up. That would not be silent, but the Greek is shut up. And now here he said they wouldn't let him talk. And so anytime a demon seeks to have power over Jesus, he slams it. And I think that in the context of the telling of the gospel, or the writing of the gospel, it was at a period where, particularly in apocalyptic Judaism, the world was full of these spirits, and the kingdom of God, the kingdom of light, was in a lethal battle of war versus the kingdom of the devil and the kingdom of darkness. And so what's happening here is a whole other drama being played out on another level, not just healing people and making them well, but also defeating the spiritual life of that. But anyway,
I think there's truck to that. I also feel like in Mark and in Jesus' life, there is a very earthbound, real controversy between the religious sacred boundaries and then the ones that the kingdom of God is meant to break and set new guidelines.
Good point.
So I don't know that it's maybe the unseen spiritual world alone. It could also be that earlier I used the word demonized. I think these people that we meet in the gospel that have demons are people who are demonized. They're outcasts. They rouse up the crowds against them. Crowds gather around them because they're so, whatever they are, controversial or provocative, and they need to be dealt with, and put out. And Jesus puts the demon out of them and declares them clean. So there's something there where he does that in the temple. They're called unclean spirit, just in the passage before this. And now out in the world, they're called demons. I feel like Mark is playing with the temple purity, clean versus unclean. It's holy versus unclean. And Jesus is just dealing with, demonized and made clean, over against the religious establishment that would call them outcasts.
Yeah, this is your Girardian view of the plan of that, and super well taken. I thought you were actually going to go to another place on that, which was he goes in and Jesus touches a woman. And
that too.
That's
well
would have
written.
been way out of bounds. We have this.
On the Sabbath day.
On the Sabbath day, and we're going to get Jesus. Sunset. The Syro is going to be with the Syrophoenician woman and the woman who has been bleeding for 12 years. That this touch. So Jesus is breaking through the boundaries of that, and those boundaries are still in play in certain places. I can say in the town we live in, when a new rabbi moved to town, I greeted him and introduced myself, and I went to shake hands with his wife, and she said, she nodded and she said plainly, I don't shake hands, because of their pious devotion, which I super completely respect. But that would be an example of I don't shake hands. I don't shake hands with a man, right? That's just not there. So we have that even still. So I thought you were going that place.
Well,
you're in another spot too.
Didn't say it, but that's just part of the whole picture. I think that he's breaking boundaries left and right. He's eating with sinners and touching lepers and all of the stuff. But I feel it's significant that he's raising her up, and he raises up Jairus' daughter, the little girl, in the same way, and then a little boy who's got an unclean spirit, and he raises these people up. So one after the next in Mark, he's acting out the post-resurrection work.
Yeah, good call.
And we get a lot of that just right here.
The word raise up, yeah.
And even, here in the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out. I feel like that's another Markan clear phrase of precursor to the resurrection.
I didn't catch that. That's good. I didn't catch the in the morning.
No,
nice.
I didn't
and
either.
Then they hunt for him
very
just
good.
like they do at the resurrection.
Yeah, that's a good call on your part. That's a very good call.
So speaking of, we get Mark's first telling of Jesus' prayer life, how he prays.
Yeah.
He prays, I'm sure he prays at other times in other ways, but in this case, outside, in the dark, and alone.
And in this case, it's, likely on a hill, because around the Sea of Galilee, there are those gentle hills around the edge. And the word that they use there, for a deserted place or a lonely place. There's no desert around there. The Sea of Galilee is the breadbasket of that area, was then and is now. But the Greek word for that, and you guys will do better with this than I will do, but is the Greek word where we get hermit, and we get that whole kind of aromatical spirituality of solitaries, of going to the desert, of getting rid of, and being alone with the divine. Yeah, it's a super important story. Yeah, super important story, John. And given that you have contemplative leanings, one that you can really identify with and enjoy in particular.
Yeah, Brian McLaren and Richard Rohr, that whole camp, talk a lot about using this gospel about the importance of the and between action and contemplation.
Right, yes.
That Jesus does it all, and it's not just silence, it's like silence with God in the dark, in the quiet, and very intentional to go back out to action.
It's all there, the action and the contemplative, and there's I don't know if struggle or tension is the right word, but certainly a dynamic of Jesus being in the midst of humanity and all of the activity and even chaos and obviously pain and certainly noise of that, and of course the community and all the nice things that come with that as well. But Jesus is also somebody who has a hunger for communion with God, which is experienced in a unique way in silence. You can't get what you get in silence outside of silence. That is my.
That's well said.
You can't. You can't talk your way there. You can't read your way there. You have to.
Right.
I think
that
go there. One of the great joys of my sabbatical was to have so much more time for silence, and my whole sort of conclusion was that the real deal here is not that we go to outer space, it's that we go to inner space. And the journey into inner space, I remember I said when I first came back, wouldn't it be awesome if Elon Musk was as interested in inner space as he is in outer space? Because to enter into inner space is to enter into the depths of your humanity, the depths of all humanity, and the depths of the divine if you hang in there long enough. And so this piece of Jesus going off to pray, it's amazing how so few words are so powerful and have such a big effect on us. Enormous.
Yeah.
I think we could wrap up just for the sake of our listeners, but there is so many more things to explore in here. Just any last word, and then we can leave some cliffhangers for people.
Let's have mercy and be quiet.
Go into our silence.
Yes.
So thanks for listening today. And don't forget to leave us a voicemail if you get a chance. The number is 203-442-5002. The phone's been lighting up lately, and we have Tony from Wilkesboro, Pennsylvania, who left us a very, very nice message. Let's hear it.
Hi, this is Tony Brooks. I'm the verger of St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And I just want to give you a positive comment. I enjoy every single Tuesday, I don't know, for the last couple of months since I discovered your podcast or YouTube and watching on television. You have helped me greatly come more in love with the gospel and look forward to every Sunday in how my particular priest will give his sermon. So thank you very, very much, and keep up the good work in New Canaan, Connecticut. Hi from Pennsylvania. Bye.
That's so moving. I love that people are listening, and I really appreciate the feedback. I think that to me it keeps my feet to the fire to keep preparing and doing this with you.
Yeah, it's exactly the purpose of Rev'd for Sunday. It's to help prepare the turf for the gospel, so that when it comes on Sunday morning, it's more fruitful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And only one thing I'll add is that ever since I was in seminary, I really longed for the approval of a verger. So thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Vergers are the best.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
All right. Well, have a great week, and thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.